This is Apple's new 15-inch MacBook Air, and it may be the best MacBook ever made, but does that mean that it's right for you? Well, I've spent a month using this laptop, testing its larger form factor, its performance, and its battery life to find out not only if you should choose it over the smaller MacBook Air, but also, is that larger display good enough to have you skipping an upgraded MacBook Pro? And did I do this walking shot all in one take? Well, there's some mysteries the world shouldn't know, but you know what we should figure out? Can this MacBook Air actually survive a drop test off this ledge? You actually thought I was gonna drop it off the ledge? You're sick. You're a sick and twisted individual. We all know the MacBook would break from this height. You know what? Let's just get to the video and find out if this laptop is right for you, okay? You disgust me. So the 15-inch MacBook Air is Apple's biggest MacBook Air that they have ever built. It's even bigger than the 14-inch MacBook Pro in overall dimensions, and it's also the heaviest MacBook Air that Apple has ever made, weighing in at 3.3 pounds. And you don't have to be Greg's Gadgets to figure out, yeah, for the most part, this design down to the flat sides, the bezels, the notch, is the same as Apple's 13-inch M2 MacBook Air, which was released over a year ago. This time, this MacBook Air, the real difference is it just has a bigger 15.3-inch display. So while that's an easy way to explain it, I did actually want to dig a little bit deeper here into the overall philosophy of this product to see if this was really worthy of the MacBook Air brand, because as a bigger laptop, I believe that to be worthy of the name Air, it still needs to be portable and lightweight. So is it? Well, the 15-inch MacBook Air had no problem fitting into the bags I use to carry my laptops. It was thin enough to slide easily into my bag and out of my bag for quick access, and the 3.3-pound weight still felt pretty lightweight and is still lighter weight than some of Apple's smaller products like the 14-inch MacBook Pro. It didn't feel out of place sitting with it in a chair, and even though it had a bigger footprint, it still felt right at home at a cafe or a smaller table. I haven't been on an airplane with it yet, but I'd probably guess that it would just fit on that smaller tray table. So while this is a big laptop, I would say that it is indeed worthy of that MacBook Air name, and it does still carry that philosophy of a lightweight and thin laptop that isn't a pain to carry around. And that's what impressed me the most about the Air. The design felt like I was carrying a smaller laptop than it actually was, until I opened up the lid and was greeted by that bigger 15-inch display. And this display size made a noticeable difference. It felt like you could fit an extra app on the display pretty comfortably, whereas on the smaller 13-inch, you'd probably feel a little bit more limited in overall display space. I also just love the bigger display for blowing up a single app, maximizing it right to a full window, and then in apps like Final Cut Pro or Affinity Photo, I could see bigger previews of my videos, more of the timeline, and see less of a cramped arrangement of my tools. It was a much more comfortable workspace to work in. And yeah, it's also great to kick back and just watch a video on it. But if you're wondering if there's any extra display advantages versus the smaller 13-inch Air, well, there isn't. It's the same exact LCD panel, just bigger. So it has the same 500 nits of brightness, the same pixel density, the same P3 wide color gamut, and it lacks some of the more expensive display upgrades found on products like the MacBook Pro. So it, doesn't have like a mini LED HDR capable display. It doesn't have the faster 120 hertz refresh rate, but take it from me as someone who has lived on that 14-inch MacBook Pro for like over 2 years now, the display on the 15-inch Air held up just fine. And honestly, I can notice the difference between the displays, but after being on it for a month, it's kind of hard to tell. Like you get used to this display, and it's a good LCD display. I'm not like MacBook displays have always been great. This 15-inch Air one is no exception. Now, while display quality between the 13 and 15-inch laptops are the same, the speakers are not. The 15-inch MacBook Air has a better 6-speaker system, and it is impressive how good these speakers sound given the relatively thin profile of this laptop. There's just a bit more bass, a bit more richness, and a bit more clarity to these speakers that make them a better upgrade over the 13-inch MacBook Air. They're really good for listening to music and watching video. They still don't have the speaker prowess of something like the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and especially not the 16-inch MacBook Pro, which have thicker design, so obviously you can probably fit in better, speakers and better acoustics overall inside of those machines. But, for $700 less at the base model between those Pro laptops, this 15-inch one sounds remarkably good. Apple is just really great in the speaker department. What about other features? Well, it's the same again as the 13-inch Air, for better or worse, which means for ports, it still has two ultra-fast Thunderbolt USB-C 4 ports and a dedicated MagSafe charging port. Now, one criticism I would give the 15-inch Air is it's a much larger Mac than that 13-inch laptop. So I would have loved to see an additional port, maybe like a third USB-C port, or hey, maybe even something like an SD card slot. I feel like it's big enough to include it, so why not? And other things are the same, right? So it still has the same 1080p webcam, which I think looks good enough for the occasional video call. And even though the 15-inch is bigger, it still has the same exact keyboard size and layout as the 13-inch model, with just bigger borders around the keyboard. The typing experience is still really good. The Touch ID system is still there to ensure you can easily enter passwords and unlock your Mac very easily with your fingerprint. I guess one difference it does have is a slightly larger trackpad than the 13-inch, but they're both really big, so they're both great for scrolling and using Mac gestures. And I know this video is getting a little boring now because I said the same this and the same that, and yeah, the battery life on the 15-inch is kind of the same. It's great, don't get me wrong, but it is the same as the 13-inch, which gets around an 18-hour battery life rating. It felt about exactly the same to me, and that is the gold standard for Apple Silicon laptop batteries. But that's a good thing, right? And you guessed it, there's more good things, but the same. The M2 chip, it makes its way from the 13-inch, and it is now on this 15-inch laptop. However, while benchmarking this chip, I actually found some interesting results, and that was that with longer multi-threaded CPU workloads and during GPU benchmarks, the 15-inch thermals were better than the 13-inch model. The MacBook Air does not have a fan in it to dissipate heat, so that means that all of this extra cooling was due to the larger size of the MacBook Air. You wouldn't think that the bigger size would add that much to the performance difference, but in this Tomb Raider benchmark, the 15-inch Air scored closer to an M2 MacBook Pro, which does have a fan in it, than the 13-inch MacBook Air. So yeah, there is a performance difference in this bigger laptop. Now listen, I don't think that performance jump is significant enough to have you buying this model if you prefer the smaller size of the 13-inch model, but you can take it as a nice little bonus. For most tasks though, yeah, the 15-inch Air will perform exactly the same as the 13-inch because let's face it, most of the users buying this laptop don't need high-end CPU or GPU performance. They just want a laptop that works, opens app fast, and is responsive. And the great news is that any Apple Silicon Mac, this 15-inch MacBook Air included, is a speed demon for everyday tasks. Web browsing, word processing, video calls, watching video. Yeah, it is a reliably fast computer. It is very hard to slow these Apple Silicon Macs down. And at $1,300, I think this base model would probably fit most people's needs. And in terms of whether you should get the 13-inch or the 15-inch, don't overthink it. If you want a smaller laptop, go for the 13-inch Air. But if you want a bigger display, well, this is a no-brainer. It has a bigger display and a few other benefits, and now you no longer have to spend $2,500 to get a display that is above 14 inches in the Apple Mac laptop lineup. That is a very, very good thing for consumers because I think most of the people that want a bigger laptop just want it for the bigger display. They don't actually need all of the additional performance that would come on a MacBook Pro model. So, who is this 15-inch MacBook Air really for? Well, I think the real power of what Apple has done with their Apple Silicon MacBook lineup is that they have made products based more on personal preference rather than a necessity. And what I mean by that is, in the Intel days, there were more noticeable benefits going from something like a MacBook Air to a higher-end machine like a MacBook Pro. Normal users could notice real speed advances by upgrading, but that's not really the case anymore. The 15-inch Air is great for anyone that wants a MacBook Air but bigger, and that's a lot of people. That's everyday computer use for home or work, whether you're a student or traveling for business, and it's even good for intermediate users on a more limited budget who can't spend $2,000 on a MacBook Pro. I have no problem recommending this laptop to users just starting out with video or photo editing, as well as music production or development. And because there's such a broad audience for this laptop, that does always bring out people asking me for upgrade advice. And my advice is that if you're watching this video, you might be more of a power user than the typical person. I'm just guessing that the Greg's Gadgets viewers want some more power in their Macs. So you're probably asking, should I even upgrade this Mac? How far should I upgrade it? And if I start spending a lot of money on the upgrades, should I just go for something else like a MacBook Pro? To answer that first part of the question, I think the best upgrade to make, if you have to pick one, is to add in 16 gigabytes of memory. My review model, again, it's the base model, right? So it has 8 gigabytes of memory, it has 256 gigabytes of storage. But if I wanted to edit something like multiple 4K streams in Final Cut Pro, having that 8 gigabytes really does slow me down. But the 15-inch Air is powerful enough to run apps like Final Cut Pro or Photoshop. So if you plan to run a lot of apps at once or more powerful apps like that, spending $200 on 16 gigabytes memory, it's a wise investment. 256 gigabytes of storage, listen, it is limited too. So if you want to store more files, like larger video files or photo files directly on the laptop, without using an external SSD drive, upgrading to 512 gigabytes might be smart too. But unlike memory, you can always buy cheaper external SSDs to plug into your MacBook. I know that's not ideal if you want to really use this for like a travel laptop and you don't have to want to worry about plugging in external storage, but it is an option. At least it's an option, whereas with the memory, you're stuck with whatever you get. So again, if you had to make one upgrade, I'd probably go with the memory. But for argument's sake, let's say you upgrade both. You upgrade the memory and you upgrade the storage. Well, that would then take that base model and bump that up to a price of around $1,700, which does put it $300 less than the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which may have you wondering, well, for $300 more, should I just upgrade to the MacBook Pro? Well, I think that's a question, well, honestly, it's hard to answer for everyone, but I'd say all of these Macs have their place in the lineup, right? For most people, that means the MacBook Pro upgrade is just unnecessary, and most people don't need that level of performance. However, if you are planning to buy a Mac for professional-grade tasks, and you have that higher budget, well, it's all in the name, right? It's called the MacBook Pro. Like, I get it, maybe this 15-inch Air design or that larger display is tempting, and obviously a lower price is always nice, but don't be fooled. The 14-inch MacBook Pro, it's going to perform better, and it's going to be a better laptop for demanding pro users. Still, that doesn't mean this 15-inch model is slow or bad. Like I said, for most people, this is going to be super fast for most everyday tasks. And if you're coming from an older Intel MacBook, even if it's an older Intel MacBook Pro, this 15-inch is likely to run laps around it. It's likely to be even faster. It's kind of like an amazing time we're living in that you can get such a great laptop at these price points with very little compromises. And for most tasks, yeah, these are even going to be the same speed, really, in single-core performance as the Pro models. I actually think out of all the laptops that Apple sells right now, the 15-inch Air is the most well-rounded. It has great performance for most users, excellent battery life, no noisy fan, good speakers, a bigger display, and it doesn't sacrifice significantly on portability. It's why after 1 month of using this laptop, I think it's the one most people should get. And if you want to get one, check out my affiliate link in the description below. And also, if you like this video, and I did a good job, give me a like, give me a sub, and I'll catch you in the next one, because retention is a thing on YouTube. So I gotta cut these. Oh, damn it. I just started doing a long outro. All right, bye.